This video is going to cover some basic optimizations that you can do to your Rails application to speed it up. We're going to start by covering how to solve issues where if you're grabbing all of your posts, you're also hitting the database each time for the user. We've talked about this previously. This is generally called a N+1 query because you're grabbing N posts, and for each one you're doing a +1 to grab the users. We're then going to take a look at how to fix in the admin dashboard whenever we grab the number of comments. We're hitting the database multiple times, so we're going to fix that. And then we're going to take a look at how to optimize the database seed file so that we can seed big data so that we can do performance benchmarks a little bit better. So we're going to get started by adding the gem to do our performance optimizations. So I'm going to say Rails S just to start the server to see what I currently have in here. So if I come in here and I log in, okay, and now that I've logged in, we can just take a look around real quick. So if we come over to the admin dashboard, we can see the comment counter, and that's just going to hit the database multiple times to grab the count. We can also see up here that there's a whole bunch of stuff being hit. So what we'll do is we'll stop the server and we'll do a bundle add bullet. So this is going to be for the bullet gem, which I have open right here on GitHub. I'll have a link to this in the video description. But basically by adding bullet and then doing the Rails G bullet : install command, I'll full screen this, and then hitting Y to add it to the test environment if you want to, or you can hit N. In this case, I'm going to hit N. That will install the bullet gem. Then we can come over to our config environments development.rb, and you'll see that the bullet gem is in here. If we come over to our gem file, of course, the bullet gem is listed at the bottom now. So let's go ahead and let's run a Rails S command, and we'll refresh the page and we'll start getting the errors. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the front page first. I'll clear the console, or maybe I won't. I'll just hit enter a couple times, and then I'll refresh the page. So now when we refresh a page or when we load a page, it's going to tell you whenever it finds an issue where you're hitting the database more times than you should. Now it won't find all the issues, but it'll find a lot of them, and it'll even tell you what to do to fix it. So here it's telling us, if I can bump up the font size a bit, zoom in, and then I'll refresh again. I don't know if that helped or not. I'll just zoom in on it in post. So it's telling us that we need to add to our query the .includes recipient for our notifications. And it's going to tell us where in the view this is happening, but we know that this is of course happening in the controller, and it's in our application controller. So let me bump up the font size a bit and I'll full screen this. And basically what it wants us to do is after the notification, we want to do a .includes. And we want to includes, what does it tell us here? The recipient. So we'll just say includes : recipient. Recipient. And then where recipient equals current user. So then we click OK, we refresh, and if we don't get the alert anymore, we know we fixed that issue. We can then come over to our blog, where it'll tell us some other problems. So here it's saying that the post needs to eager load the user, which we can do by doing the includes user. So we'll come over to post controller, and in the post controller, we can come up to the post index. We have post, we just want to do post.includes, and then : user. We can save that, exit the full screen, click OK. It then wants us to add rich text body to the post, so we'll do that too. So we'll come here and do comma, : rich _ body, and we'll save that, and then exit full screen, click OK, refresh the page, and we're no longer getting those issues. And we'll take a look at how to benchmark this in a minute so that you can see what the difference is with all of these changes. Next, let's click on show post, and here it's telling us we need to eager load the user. So in our show page, we need to include the user, which we're not doing here. But I think this is actually the user for the comment, so we can do that here. So we have @post.comments.includes, and then just : user. So anytime you have a collection of stuff or you're grabbing a collection of stuff, you can then do an includes to include it. And of course, it wants us to include the rich text body again. So I'm going to copy it from here and paste it down here. And I guess while we're doing this, I can talk about it. So the way that the includes works is you have 3 different options. I think you can do an includes call, a dot preload call, or you can do a eager _load call. And they all work slightly differently. I'll have a link to an article that covers it. I think I have it on my other monitor. It's this one right here on optimizing a Rails app. Basically, the way it works is they have different ways of structuring the query. So they might hit the database multiple times or only hit it one time. But if you hit it one time, you might, load too much data. So instead, what they do is they suggest in most cases to use the includes call, because Rails will then look at the includes call and figure out, should I use includes, should I use preload, or should I use eager load? So Rails figures that out for you by using that, which is why we're largely using this in all these locations. The next thing we can do, because we've now covered the show page, I guess, is we can come over to the admin panel. So go over to the admin page, click on post, and it'll tell us to avoid eager loading detected. So here we're including the posts. So let's come over to our admin controller. And in here you can see we are including the comments. So we're going to stop including that, click OK, and then refresh the page. And now it's going to tell us that we need a counter cache. So the way that a counter cache works is instead of doing a .count where you hit the database multiple times for each of these, let me see if I can find it in the terminal. So here you can see whenever we load the page, it's doing select count from comments, where comments post ID, and it's doing that multiple times. And it's doing it for each of the posts with an ID on here, which is all of these. So the way to stop this is you can actually add something called a counter cache, and you're going to add that to your comment model. So in the comment model, where we have the belongs to post, we can just do a comma, counter underscore cache, true. That's going to add the counter cache, but then we need to add a migration for it. So I'm going to stop the server and I'll full screen this. And I'll say, let's do a Rails G migration. And we want to do add comment counter cache to posts. We'll say comments underscore count and integer. So that will add our column to the database. And now I'm going to do a Rails DB migrate command to force this change. And now that we've done that migrate command, if we come in here and we start the server again, so say Rails S, refresh the page, all of our counts will now be 0. And the reason for that is we haven't updated the count with this new counter cache for all of these models. Remember with the friendly ID gem, we had to recreate the slug for existing posts. Here we have to do a similar thing. The way that we can do this is actually with a migration. So I'll full screen this. And I'll say Rails G migration, populate post comments count. And then I'm going to say -- force, I think. So that should tell it to force the migration. So let's come over to the DB migrate and the populate comments count. And in here, what we want to do is we'll say post.all.each do post. And instead of this, we'll do capital P post. So we're working off of the actual class .reset underscore counters. And then we'll say post.id because it takes in an ID and then whatever counter cache we want to reset, which is going to be comments. So we can do that. And then we can exit out of full screen this and run a Rails DB migrate command to migrate the database. So you can see here it migrated. And then do a Rails S to start the server. And we can refresh the page. And then I'll try and find, actually first we'll see that the counter has updated. And then I'll try and find the calls for the count again. At the start where we used to load all of the comment counter, that is no longer happening. So now it's just a call to a column on the model. So that's all well and good. We've now updated all of these pages. I'll leave the post show page for you to do because it's very similar to what we just did. it's just a good way for you to check, your learning or whatever. What we can do now though, is we can actually try to stress the application just to see what the performance is like. So I'm going to come over to the blog show page and I'm going to stop the application. And this is a part where you can follow along if you want to, but I am going to be dropping the database for no good reason. So just keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Rails DB : drop. So that's going to delete my database. So don't do that if you value your development database. And then I'm going to open up the seed file. This is where we're going to do our second part of the video, because we're going to overhaul this a little bit so that we can do some benchmarks. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, let's do this 10 times, or let's do this 100 times. We'll move the comments down to 2 times. And then in here, we'll say puts, creating post X. And then we'll say puts, creating comment Y for post X. That looks good. And then, yeah, this all looks fine. So this will just create 100 posts with 2 comments each. So we'll be creating 200 elements. So now I'm going to say Rails DB : setup to migrate the database and then to do this seeding. And you can see here now it's running this. And the reason why I have it printing to the console is because this takes a long time to do. So I thought this would be a good way just for us to keep track of our progress while we do this. So that will seed the entire database, and then I'll run a Rails S command to start the server again. I'll come over to the /posts. We can refresh the page. And you can see here now when we go to render this, all of it is just rendered text, which is a lot of stuff that we're hitting the page for. We're also grabbing multiple different record IDs and stuff, but overall our query is pretty small, right? What's interesting here is this is currently taking 334, or I guess 371 milliseconds. So let me come over to our post controller and I'll full screen this. And I'm going to get rid of this includes call. Oops, this is actually on the index. I'm going to get rid of this includes call. So there we go. It's gone. And now I'm going to refresh the page. So this was 371 milliseconds. I'll click OK. I'll click OK. And then I'll scroll up a bit. So this is 618 milliseconds. So, that's about double. If I refresh the page a couple times, I think it'll actually cache it a little bit and it won't be as noticeable. So yeah, now it's like 430. But you can see how that quickly scales out of control. You won't always have 100 posts on your page, but you might have some posts on your page. And depending on how bad your N+1 queries are, it can actually really hurt your performance. But let's take a look at our seed file real quick, because that took a long time to do. And, we're here to optimize more than just what we were doing. So I'm actually going to drop in this call right here. I'm going to create a variable called elapsed, set it equal to Benchmark.measure do, which means we need an end block down here. And what this is going to do is it's going to take whatever code is executed inside of here, and it's just going to tell us how long it took to run. So we can actually come into a Rails console. So I'll say Rails C inside of my VS Code. You can, of course, do this in your terminal or whatever. Actually, I don't like how that looks. We're just going to come over here. So I'll say Rails C right here. And I'll full screen this. So we can do the Benchmark.measure. So I'll say elapsed equals Benchmark.measure do end. And then in here, what I'll do is I'll say, I don't know, post.all.each do post. Oops, we actually have to come down here. And then I'll say post.user.email, and we'll puts that to the console. So I'll say puts. I'll come down here and end both of these. I'll click enter. And now if I do and you can see here how many times we hit the database there to select the users, right? So this is all of the stuff that we're trying to get rid of right now. So if I take that same one just real quick and I say post.includes:user.all, it's just printing it out to the screen. So we've eliminated all of those hits to the database. Instead, we're just doing one call for select users. Okay, so that's neat. But the reason why I wanted to do this wasn't to show the optimized version. I wanted to grab the initial one. So I'm going to change this from elapsed to initial. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to change this to the final. And I'll change this to .includes:user. enter. Okay, so now we have our initial, which I can hit enter on. It's going to give us a whole bunch of time. The one we really care about is the real. So I'm going to say initial.real. That is 0.04 seconds. And now we have our final.real, which is 0.005 seconds. So it's, a fraction of the initial time that it took there. The point isn't that we're doing it faster with the includes here necessarily. Instead, what I wanted the point to be is I need to bump this down 1 so I can see. We can actually speed up how fast our seed time takes here. Because if we stop this and we do a Rails db:/drop command, and I exit out of here, if I do this, and then I do a Rails db:, let me actually come down here just to be sure. I want to do puts, time elapsed, whatever. And actually I have a better one over here. I'll copy this one. So I'm going to say puts created posts.count posts and comments.count comments in elapsed.real seconds. So this is just telling us how many posts and how many comments we created in the amount of time in seconds. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to do a Rails db:/setup command, and that'll run our setup. And while that's running, we can go ahead and we can work on the optimized version. So for this, we're actually going to come up top here outside of our loop, and we're going to say posts is equal to an empty array, and comments is equal to an empty array. And apparently I didn't have this in there because I did this the wrong way. So we're going to do it like this. We're just going to say elapsed time is, and then we'll just do a Rails db:/drop and a Rails db:/migrate again, or Rails db:/setup. What we're doing with these two variables is we're going to grab all of this. We'll actually bump up the numbers quite a bit. So we'll leave this at 10 and we'll make this 1,000, I guess. So there you can see that took 12 seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this from a create to a new, and we're going to change this from a create to a new, and we're going to set this to be equal to comment. So we're going to create a post equal to the post and a comment equal to the comment, but we're not going to do our transaction yet. We're then going to come right here and we're going to say post or posts.push, and we're just going to push the post. We can come into here after we create the comment, and we can say comments.pushComment. Now we can come down here after the elapsed time, or I guess before the elapsed time would make more sense, right? And we can do a post.import posts, and we can do a comment.import comments. Now to do this, we need to come over to our console because we need to import a gem. And this gem is going to be, so we're going to say bundle, add ActiveRecord, one word, ActiveRecord-import. That's going to add the gem for us to the gem file. In my case, I already have it. And then we can go ahead and save this. So that's going to give us the ability to run this import command. So what this will do is it can actually take all of these objects we've created and it can import them, give them the IDs that they need, and it'll all work just fine. So now our previous time was, I believe, like 12 seconds. So we're going to run a Rails db:/drop command. And then we're going to run a Rails db:/setup command. Bearing in mind that I bumped the time up by about 1,000 here, I guess. You can see here it's cruising along through all of these, printing it out to the command because it doesn't have to do the transaction anymore. So now we're just limited by the speed of these puts, which is still a long time, but we'll see how far this goes. Okay, so I think our previous time was about 12 seconds for, I guess, 102. And this time it was 14 seconds for 1,000 times 10, so 10,000 versus 200 transactions. So we took 2 more seconds or 3 more seconds to do it if you want to round up, and we did about, 50 times the transactions. So this is a really good way to look at things. If you're interested in your performance, you can do your benchmarks. And if you're interested in doing like bulk transactions, I'd highly recommend just doing this post.imports with the ActiveRecord import gem. But the key takeaway here is if we come into our views and our admin page and our, I guess the post page, In here, now when we do the dot size, it's not hitting the database multiple times to get the count for each of the comments because we have our counter cache. And whenever we visit a page, we aren't hit with all of those. Let me start the server. We aren't hit with all those database hits for needing to grab like the posts or the users for stuff. But if you're interested in doing some testing, I have a video that covers using devise in your integration tests, and I'll have a link to that video on the screen right now.